Hi everyone, I'm back. There's a little caveat. I'm really sorry by the way that I look. I've woken up this morning and I'm not feeling all that great. It's now about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm feeling a bit better and I didn't want to let you guys down, so I've decided to put on my laptop and do this video. And because I'm not feeling well, I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible. But yeah, I don't want to leave you guys hanging, as it were. But anyway, book I want to talk about is the one I've been reading for the past couple of weeks, which is the Diary of Anne Frank. Now, I have read this diary multiple times, but the last time I read it, I realised when I was thinking back in preparation for this video, I think it was just before I graduated university, so I was like 2021. And oh no, yes, so I was 21 at that point because I got my qualification in the June, but I didn't have the graduation ceremony until the December, and I think it was right at my graduation ceremony that I read it, because I think it's that thing of there are certain things that you read at like key moments in your life, or at least I hope I'm not the only one who does this. But Anne Frank is that for me, because I have adored the story of Anne Frank since I was about 13. When I first read it, the copy that I had isn't this one. It had a white cover with a drawing of Anne's face and a bright blue band spine of the book, and that's the copy that I think my mum and dad still have at their house. But when I left, I bought myself a copy because that's kind of like the family copy. And yeah, and it's been there, and I've read it a few times now, and all the spines all broken up and all that lot. But I absolutely adore the Diary of Anne Frank. I think it's a phenomenal piece of work. Now, in case you don't know about Anne Frank, you know, pretty much everybody does, but just in case you don't, Anne and her family were Jews in the Second World War, during the Second World War, living in Holland, and her father, Otto Frank, managed to find them a place to go into hiding, which happened to be at his office, sorry, and he took the four of them, so it was Mr. and Mrs. Frank, Anne and her sister Margot. There was another family who was there called the Van Pels, Augusta and Herman Van Pel and their son Peter. And then later on, they were joined by another Jew who needed a hiding place, called Fritz Pfeffer. Now, in the diary, Anne, she refers to a lot of the characters, including the helpers who were in the office and such, by their real names, but the Van Pels become the Van Dans, Mr. Pfeffer becomes Mr. Durzel, and Mrs. Van Pel's first name becomes I think it's Petunia or something in the book, in the diary, but in real life her name was Augusta. So they all went into hiding in Otto Frank's office, and it was a case of that any movement that they made could be heard through the office and downstairs into the warehouse, and they had to make sure they were never heard by any of the staff. So the offices were open from about 8:30 till 5:30 every single day, every single work day, sorry. And so from up until like 8ish or something until, and then from 6 o'clock onwards, they could do whatever they like, make whatever noise they like. Obviously they were still very wary because of neighbours, but you know, they were free to do what they want. But during those hours they had to be absolutely silent to make sure that they weren't heard. They were in, it was known as the secret annex. They were there for 2 years, well, just shy of 2 years, before they were captured. They were found out, and sadly 7 of the 8 of them didn't survive concentration camps and such. Anne was one of the victims. She died just before her 16th birthday, and Otto was the only survivor. He came back, and Meep, one of the helpers, had found Anne's diary and her papers scattered all over the floor from when the Gestapo came in and tore the place apart, trying to find valuables and that. She had picked them up, she removed them before the guards returned and hid them. And when she learnt that Anne wasn't coming back, she gave them to Otto, and Otto then had them published. And it's a remarkable piece of work. Now, with the diary, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning piece of work. But obviously, it's very clear that this is not something necessarily that she intended to be published until about I think it was May April or May 1944 was when they heard on the radio an announcement saying that there'd like to be a collection of documents and diaries by just general people to be able to have a history of the war available after it's all over for people to view. And that was the only, from that point onwards, she thought about having it published. So she did rewrite sections, she took paragraphs out, she added notes and everything. And this version, with this cover and that, is known as the definitive edition, because there's 3 versions. So you've got the original one that she wrote, the second one is the version with her edits and her additional notes, and then the third one is the version that got published when Otto got it published. So, and obviously there were bits that, like, say, for example, in her diary, there's a whole section of her talking about sex and the female sexual organs and such, male sexual organs, which Otto didn't really want or have published, or maybe the publishers said, no, we don't want that in there, so they took that out, whereas this one is back in. So this one, is the best one, and it has, like, you'll have an entry and then it'll say note added on September 1943, and then you'll have that and any other additional stuff. So this is a really, really good version to have if you're able to get hold of it. Anne loved to explore a lot of things, but one thing I really love about Anne is that you can tell that she is a curious child, but she's quite different from everybody else. She's always being compared to her sister Margot, who's 15, being asked, why aren't you like Margot? Why aren't you lovely? And it's like, why are you always stubborn and pick fights and all that lot? But as Anne says in the book, that she kind of feels that she has to. She wants to be a modern woman. She has to fight her corner, and that's why she is the way she is. I mean, this, throughout the 2 years, you can really see, especially in her writing, the words that she uses to describe, not just the way that her thoughts that are coming out in her writing, but the way that she writes things, her sentence structure, everything really develops over the course of the 2-year period. And I find her so interesting and so fascinating. And I remember being like 13 and reading this for the first time. I feel like I'm talking to one of my friends, because there are certain things that you think about or question about, or the way that you react to things. I totally got it, and I don't think at the time reading the diary for the first time that I knew what happened to her, and it was a real shock to the system when I learned what happened to her. And I think that's what has developed my love for her family, her helpers, obviously the other people hiding in the annex, the story and the history of it. And I've got a load of books about Anne Frank, and I completely fell in love with a biography, which is in my non-fiction jar, by Melissa Muller of hers, and that book was just stunning to me. I loved it. So there's so many questions that we're still asking about Anne, about who betrayed Anne. The latest theory from I think it was a couple of years ago now, was that it was a complete coincidence that the Gestapo just happened to turn up at their 263 Pressengrad, is the address of the the office, that they just happened to turn up and found them there. I don't believe that. I'm sorry, I don't believe that at all. Because even though, yes, Gestapo now were going into houses and stuff and finding Jews, it's like, yes, but they were report of something came through to say there are people hiding in there, and that's why they went to get them. So I can't see it as being believable to me, that it was a complete coincidence. I think that they were betrayed. It's still, if they were betrayed, it's still not known who did it. Otto believed that it was one of the workers, who was referred to in the diary as a new man who is believed he's a thief, and things go missing in the warehouse when he's there, but he also leaves like booby traps, like pencils on the edges of tables, so that if people walk by they'll get knocked off, but they quickly figured out and got round them, as it were, these booby traps. But it was such a wonderful thing to go back to the story of Anne, and it's just unreal, the things that she comes out with. I mean, there's a bit here, sorry, I'll just find where she is, where she's talking about women, and the respect of women. This is from June 1944, so she's just turned 15 when she wrote this. So, in the book Men Against Death, I was greatly struck by the fact that in childbirth alone, women commonly suffer more pain, illness, and misery than any war hero ever does. And what's her reward for enduring all that pain? She gets pushed aside when she's disfigured by birth. Her children soon leave. Her beauty is gone. Women who struggle and suffer pain to ensure the continuation of the human race make much tougher and more courageous soldiers than all of those big-mouth freedom-fighting heroes put together. I don't mean to imply that women should stop having children. On the contrary, nature intended them to, and that's the way it should be. What I condemn are our system of values, and the men who don't acknowledge how great, difficult, but ultimately beautiful women's share in society is. That's when you're like I said, I was like 13 years old and I read that. That was a really big thing for me, and I just felt like I would have loved to be a friend of Anne Frank, I think. But I think Anne was also at the same time, because of these, the way that she was, the personality, I think it was take a lot to become her friend, in that I feel like she was always doing like a test in the back of her mind and seeing if she quizzed you about certain things, depending on your response, depended if you could be friends in that kind of like how I feel like maybe Jane Austen was like. You had to respond to her wits and such, and react in certain ways in order for you to be within her inner circle. I've always thought that if I ever had, how you play that game of celebrity dinner parties, of if you could have dinner parties with any celebrities, any whatever, alive or dead, doesn't matter, who would you have at your party? And Anne Frank would be one of mine. I'd have to go, obviously depending on how many seats are available, Anne Frank, Jane Austen, J.K. Rowling, and Lin-Manuel Miranda. They would be my top four. As to, well, oh no, I'd also have to, well, technically no, my sister's not famous though. Well, she's been on YouTube, she can, I'd have to bring my sister with me, because she'd absolutely kill me if I was having dinner with J.K. Rowling, Jane Austen, and Lin-Manuel Miranda and didn't invite her, so I'd invite my sister as well. That's what I choose, who I choose. For those various spots. Obviously, if the dinner party was bigger, I'd have to really think about the other spots. But I think that Anne, her diary represents innocence, um, the 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 change between the borderline between childhood and adulthood, um, racism to do with how, the treatment of the Jews and everything, hope, fear, every emotion under the sun. I mean, when you have the burglar sequence happens, it's really tense when you're reading the book. I love her witticism. I love her relationship with her family. I love the struggle that she has with her love for her father versus her love for her mother, and how her father was everything to her. And at one point, she writes him a letter basically saying, "I'm a woman, I'm independent, you can't tie me down," and all this lot. And it really upset Otto and made him cry. He was so upset by it. And she talks about it in her diary. But she said that, "I can't help how I feel," and how that causes a shift in their relationship. The kind of the everyday routine of being quiet, and the times of day that you're allowed to flush the toilet and deal with each other, the arguments that happen, how they can't touch the curtains, they can't open windows, they just got to sit and just simmer away and try and keep in one piece. I couldn't have done it. I'm flabbergasted by what they went through for 2 years. I've never had the opportunity to go to see the Anne Frank house. I would love to go see the Anne Frank house. I'm sure I'd bawl my eyes out if I ever got the opportunity to go. But I think because I was about 13 when I first read it, and I felt like Anne was my friend, I always think of her in my mind as a friend. And I think everybody who reads this diary can't help but think of her as a friend. And she's very much talking directly to you. I mean, Kitty is the name she calls her diary, but she does things like she describes, a day, and then the next entry she says, "Oh dear Kitty, you've been asking me questions about XYZ. Well, here's my answer," and she is answering the questions that you're thinking in your head at that moment. So I think she kind of knew, possibly, that, if somebody's reading this as a published work, the way that she constructs things and such, that she is answering the various questions on that. But then at the same time, there's a childish innocence to it that's just so beautiful and pure and honest, and I love her for that. You'll never find an entry that's boring in this. I got through it very quickly. It's taken me a couple of weeks to read, but that's because I've been writing like crazy, and I've literally read this in 2-3 days, going back over it again. I absolutely adore this diary. It is wonderful. And one of the last things that she talks about in the diary, she goes through some really dark kind of series of depression throughout the course of the diary, the 2 years, and she talks very openly about it. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the passage. I didn't bookmark it. How bad of me. And she talks very openly about her feelings and everything. But one of the last things that she writes, which is from the sorry, it's a long diary entry. It's about 3 or 4 pages long. This one. It's from the 15th of July 1944. So about 2 weeks before they were found. So she said, "It's difficult in times like these. Ideals, dreams, and cherished hopes rise within us only to be crushed by grim reality. It's a wonder that I haven't abandoned all my ideals. They seem so absurd and impractical, yet I cling to them because I still believe that in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart." That is such a powerful thing for a 15-year-old girl to say, I think. And I find her so fascinating, and we're still asking questions about her. What Otto did to set up the Anne Frank Foundation to teach young children about racism and discrimination, and everything is an amazing, organisation. It's what they do is fabulous work. She talks a lot about a chestnut tree in the garden that she likes to look at, and unfortunately it got cut down. It was what, I think about maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, and I watched that on YouTube and I cried when that happened because I was really upset about the tree. But it's unfortunately it was a case of that the tree was dying and it had to be cut down, and it really, that moment kind of told you how how it's been over 70 years now. But it's been 72 years now, since since she died. 73 years since they were found in the annex. And it's still that important. It's still, and she always will be remembered. She will always, her diary will always be read. And it's an astonishing piece of work. So if you've never read Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl, please do. This collection, this definitive edition, is absolutely fantastic to read. So there you go, Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl. Now, in regards to adaptations, there's only 2 that I've got on DVD. There have been various others as well, but these are my 2 favourite. So the first one is the 1959 film with Millie Perkins, The Diary of Anne Frank. Now, this was a bit of a weird one because it was a combination of entries from the actual diary and the Broadway show of the diary, and various, I think 3 members of the main cast are from the Broadway cast. So they did bring that together. The actual annex was made to scale in a Hollywood studio, so they had that completely, and you feel the claustrophobic nature. You go through the quietness of the nth degree that they had to go through. It's fabulous for the claustrophobic feel, the tension and everything. That's brilliant. Negative: the way that they pronounce the names is really irritating, and for the names they use the name just to let you know, they use the names that Anne referred to them in her diary. So the Van Pels are called the Van Dans, Fritz Pfeffer is called Mr. Durzel, so that kind of thing. But there's like, her sister was Margot, and she gets referred to as Margit in this film, and I'm like, no, that's not how you pronounce her name. It's a great film, really enjoy it. Sadly, it was, even though it won 3 Academy Awards, it was a massive flop at the box office. It took like 3 million to make, and only took 2.3 million or something at the box office. It didn't do well at all. But it's, as time has gone on, it's been recognised as one of the best films of like at top 100 kind of films of all time, sort of thing, or of that period. It got like number 80 or something. So I would definitely recommend this one, despite the issue with the names and such. And there are some changes compared to the Diary of Events, but Otto was available as a consultant on that film, so there's a lot of reality and such in there as well. And the other one that I love is just simply Anne Frank. It's also known as Anne Frank: The Whole Story. And this was made in 2007. And it has, Ben Kingsley, Brenda Blethyn and such in it. And this is actually based on Melissa Muller's biography, the one that I mentioned earlier. And it covers from it's probably about 1935, I think it is, all the way through to after the war has ended. So you follow her from long before she gets the diary all the way through to when Otto finds out what's happened to Anne and Margot and the rest of the family. This is brilliant. Absolutely love this. Now, in this, regarding to the names, all the people are referred to by their actual names, not the names that Anne gave them in their diary. It's not as tension filled. It doesn't do what this film does, where you have completely silent periods because it's during the day and everything for that. There's, like with the burglary, there's a big part of the diary, and it's really well done in this, really tension filled. This, they do it, and it is kind of tense, but it only lasts about a minute, so there's not necessarily that emphasis on certain elements, but it's because it covers so long. Also, one thing to note, as it says at the beginning, because it was 2 parts, each part was about an hour and a half long, that they've actually not used Anne's diary at all to describe how she feels and what is going on in the house. It's entirely from Melissa Muller's biography of her. So yeah, so it covers, you know, various things. Meep in this, just so you know, because at the end it goes with every character, well, every person, dare I say, and tells you what happened to them. And Meep in this, because it was 2007, it refers to her still being alive and everything. Sadly, she's no longer alive. She died 3 years after this was made, but this is absolutely fantastic. I love it. It's got a lot of stuff as well, just so you know, of concentration camp life and such in it as well, including some nudity in that. So it does have a whole range of stuff. It's not just a case of when they leave the secret annex, that's the end, as what happens in this one. It goes all the way through all the camps that they go through, everything. So there is a lot more detail in this one, but you know, it just so that you're aware if you're interested. This is, I would say, this is my favourite of the 2. I really love it. Okay, that's my thoughts on Anne Frank. I was going to have a short video, but I just noticed it's 26 minutes in. Oh my. But if you've stuck all the way through, thank you very much. Sorry, I felt my back's bad at the minute, so to sort of reposition my back. So if you've read this book, I'd love to know what you think. You can leave a comment in the comments box below, or you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's entirely up to you. I'll let you to decide. And I'll be back shortly with another video announcing which fiction book I will be reading next. Alright then guys, bye.